On April 20th, 1964, the man who brought South Africa out of apartheid, Nelson Mandela, was on trial for treason. Facing the death penalty, Mandela addressed the judge.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die.
Those words came to be known as the speech from the dock. They defined a lifetime of struggle characterized by exemplary idealism and far-sighted pragmatism, rare courage and extreme grace. It was a struggle that held South Africa together and saved it from a civil war. The story of Mandela became the story of his fight for democracy in South Africa and rights for all regardless of their race or color. Born July 18, 1918, Rolihlahla Mandela belonged to royalty. His grandfather was a king of the Thembu people. His father was a chief. Young Mandela went to boarding schools and later to South Africa's only black university. He graduated in 1942 and became a lawyer. 2 years later, Mandela joined the African National Congress.
It was when I came into the African National Congress that I realized that cultures are only a part of the African people. That the task of the ANC was to unite the African people and out of them build a nation.
In the beginning, Mandela advocated a non-violent resistance to apartheid, but the white government's brutal suppression of protesters forced him to change his position. The turning point came when the government troops shot dead 69 black protesters in Sharpeville in 1960.
Made it very clear in our policy that South Africa is a country of many races. There is room for all the various races in this country. There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
Mandela founded Spear of the Nation, the military wing of the African National Congress. In the next 2 years, the ANC blew up public buildings and power lines, cut telephone links and committed widespread arson. Mandela himself left South Africa, travelling the continent and Europe, studying guerrilla warfare and building support for the ANC. When he returned in 1962, he was captured and sentenced to 5 years for incitement and illegally leaving the country. While serving this sentence, Mandela was charged along with other anti-apartheid leaders in the 1963 Rivonia treason trial. Nelson Mandela was to spend 27 years in prison. 18 of them were on Robben Island. He came to the island as prisoner 46664, the 466th inmate to arrive in 1964. He would also be the first to protest the ill treatment of the prisoners, often enough getting locked up in a solitary cell as punishment. Robben Island was a place of banishment for 3 centuries. For a period it even functioned as a leper colony. Here prison warders greeted new prisoners telling them this was where they would die. But Mandela and his colleagues of the ANC had every intention of coming out alive. The tough conditions included staying in cells measuring barely 7 square feet each. In a blindingly bright quarry, the prisoners were made to break stones and dig out limestone. In order to rush them to their tasks, the prison authorities would often shout at the inmates telling them to run. One day, when they gave the order, Mandela told his comrades to walk slowly. So slow, in fact, that it would have taken them the whole day to reach the quarry. Faced with disobedience, the prison authorities were forced to negotiate with Mandela. The defiance and rebellion, however, rarely went unpunished. Frequently, it was rewarded with isolation. To all the prisoners, including Mandela, it was the most forbidding aspect of prison life. Mandela said days would have no end and no beginning, and the mind would start to play tricks. Over time, the prisoners were allowed to read books. Mandela would urge his colleagues to study Afrikaans. They would refuse calling it the language of the white people, but Mandela would insist. He believed one should read the literature, the poetry, and understand the culture of the enemy in order to anticipate and accommodate them.
In jail, I used to go to all the churches, although I am a Methodist. But I used to go to the Anglican Church, Roman Catholic, Presbyterian. When the Muslim priest came, I used to attend. When the Hindu priest, I used to attend. So I started my own ecumenical movement inside prison.
The saddest moments of his incarceration were yet to come. He would get news that his mother and then later his eldest son had died. Mandela was not allowed to attend their funerals.
They got a telegram. The announcement was just a telegram. They called me to the reception office and told me this, and I just took the telegram and went back. And I asked for permission to attend the funeral, but that was refused. I was really devastated to lose a son, your eldest son, and I had no opportunity of paying my respects to his memory by attending the funeral. That was very devastating.
Mandela has often spoken about how he was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and the principle of non-violence. But it was his own experience in prison that taught him that lasting political benefits could be secured by not giving in to feelings of vendetta. By studying his jailers closely, Mandela said he understood that black and white people had far more things in common, and that forgiveness, generosity and respect were weapons of political persuasion far, far more powerful than guns. In later years, the South African leadership mellowed towards Nelson Mandela. He was moved to more comfortable conditions at a different prison. In 1986, South African President P.W. Botha opened secret talks with Mandela. Botha offered to release Mandela if he renounced the use of violence.
The ANC has on various occasions emphasized that it is not interested in the renunciation of violence, but that it will continue its onslaught until the takeover of power by violence has been achieved.
Mandela refused the offer. Instead, he wrote a defiant letter explaining why he chose to stay in prison. The letter was read out to a crowd by his daughter.
My father says, I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you, the people, are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. I will return. Amanda!
By the end of the 80s, a worldwide campaign had started against apartheid. Mandela himself started talks with the government on forming a multiracial democracy. In 1990, President F.W. de Klerk addressed South Africa's parliament to announce the start of a new beginning.
Now in a position to announce that Mr. Nelson Mandela will be released at the Victor Verster prison on Sunday, the 11th of February at about 3 p.m.
South African authorities had banned Mandela's writings. They even refused to allow the media to show his image. In 1988, an estimated 400 million people watched a tribute concert given by superstars of the rock and pop world to mark Mandela's 70th birthday. He became the world's most celebrated political prisoner despite the fact that few people knew what he really looked like. In February 1990, Mandela was finally released from prison.
Master of ceremonies, distinguished artist, members of the International Reception Committee, dear friends here and elsewhere in the world, our first simple and happy task is to say thank you.
2 days later, he returned home to a tumultuous welcome in Soweto. Over 120,000 people packed a stadium for the biggest political rally in South African history. Less than 3 months later, Mandela led an unbanned ANC delegation in the first face-to-face talks with South African President F.W. de Klerk and government officials. Mandela's election as ANC President in July 1991, replacing the ailing Oliver Tambo, gave him greater authority to negotiate with the white-led government. Mandela had walked out of prison after nearly 3 decades, but despite the provocation, he never answered racism with racism.
It will forever remain an indelible blight on human history that the apartheid crime ever occurred. It will forever remain an accusation and a challenge to all men and women of conscience that it took as long as it has before all of us stood up to say enough is enough.
The world welcomed Mandela's release with joy and hope. In 1990, India conferred on Mandela its highest civilian honour, the Bharat Ratna. In 1993, Mandela and de Klerk were jointly awarded the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of their efforts to pave the way for transforming South Africa into a multiracial democracy. Although he accused de Klerk's government of not doing enough to stop political and racial violence, Mandela agreed to accept the joint prize as a gesture of reconciliation.
There is no conflict between those two statements. I have committed myself to the promotion of peace in the country, but I have done so as part and parcel of the decisions and campaigns which have been taken and launched by the ANC. There's no conflict whatsoever.
The Nobel Committee said Mandela and de Klerk had pointed the way to the peaceful resolution of similar deep-rooted conflicts elsewhere in the world.
We commit ourselves to the construction of a complete, just and lasting peace. We have triumphed in the effort to implant hope in the breasts of the millions of our people. We enter into a covenant that we shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world.
Later in his autobiography, Mandela wrote that when he walked out of prison, his mission was to liberate both the oppressed and the oppressor, because both are robbed of their humanity when human freedom is restricted. During those long and lonely years, my hunger for the freedom of my own people became a hunger for the freedom of all people, white and black. I knew as well as I knew anything that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. When I walked out of prison, that was my mission, to liberate the oppressed and the oppressor both. With Mandela free and the ANC becoming the primary political party of the country's non-white majority, apartheid seemed to be on its last legs. But negotiations between the representatives of the ANC and the ruling National Party were still contentious. The government security forces collaborated with tribal nationalists to spread violence. Mandela vowed to seek peace and reconciliation with South Africa's whites, but only if blacks received full rights as citizens. 1 year later, South Africa held its first all-race elections, and Mandela was elected as the first black president in South Africa's history.
The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasms that divide us has come. The time to build is upon us. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all our people from the continuing bondage of poverty.
For many years before the fall of apartheid, white South Africans feared that the end of the white rule would start a retaliatory genocide against them. They feared the blacks would rise up to take revenge. But under President Mandela, that wave of vendetta never came. Rather than being vengeful for the decades of oppression, his administration pursued a policy to smooth the transition from apartheid to multiracial democracy.
We understand it still that there is no easy road to freedom. We know it well that none of us acting alone can achieve success. We must therefore act together as a united people for national reconciliation.
Mandela made reconciliation the theme of his presidency. He personally made numerous high-profile visits to important figures of the apartheid regime. The hallmark of his crusade was the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that probed apartheid crimes on both sides and tried to heal the country's wounds. The government stepped in to compensate political victims instead of encouraging them to bring civil suits.
Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all.
With his ability to forgive, Mandela acted with firmness to convince his black countrymen to also follow his example. And he calmed the fears of his white countrymen. That was the only way to heal the nation's wounds, laid before by the downfall of a regime as brutal as apartheid.
The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign.
The transition to democracy didn't solve all of South Africa's problems. Mandela's regime didn't achieve its goal of economic justice. In a continent so badly divided, Mandela's charisma held the nation together. Mandela was often criticized for having a poor grasp of economic issues. True to his promise, Nelson Mandela stepped down in 1999 after one term as president. He handed over to a new generation of leaders headed by Thabo Mbeki. His decision to step down voluntarily after one 5-year term as president was seen as a shining example to other African leaders who stubbornly clung to power. After leaving office, Mandela took on the role of elder statesman. He brokered a power-sharing agreement between warring Hutus and Tutsis in Burundi but failed to obtain the release of thousands of political prisoners. Mandela used his celebrity status to help South Africa on the world stage. He continued to work with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund he set up in 1995 and established the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Mandela Rhodes Foundation. He brought the 2010 Soccer World Cup to South Africa, the first time an African nation hosted the global event. He became an advocate for HIV/AIDS after the death of his son, Magato, from the disease in 2005 despite the strong taboos against those who had the virus. To the end, Mandela maintained a global presence through his Mandela Foundation. In 2007, he organized a group of senior world figures he called the Elders to work on global problems.
Massive poverty and obscene inequality are such terrible scourges of our time, times in which the world boasts breathtaking advances in science, technology, industry, and wealth accumulation, that they have to rank alongside slavery and apartheid as social evils.
Like Lincoln, Mandela achieved the historically rare feat of uniting a fiercely divided country. Unlike ordinary politicians who seek power by highlighting differences and fueling antagonism, Mandela appealed to the people's humanity. On December 5, 2013, at the age of 95, Nelson Mandela died of a recurring lung infection. The world paid homage to the statesman who led his country through bloodshed and turmoil to democracy.
When I told one of my advisors a few months ago that I wanted to retire, he growled at me, "Coach, you are retired." If that is really the case, then I should say I now announce that I'm retiring from retirement.
Mandela always acknowledged that prison shaped him. He said he went in angry, convinced that the only way of achieving his people's freedom was by the force of arms.
That day is not far when we shall lead you to freedom.
He came out to demonstrate instead that forgiveness was a better weapon.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.